Okay. Hi, everyone. We're back. The Dystopian Dance Party podcast, 12 months of Mike. I'm Zach. This is Callie.
Hello.
And we're back in Austin Powers world. 2 Austin Powers in a row. I want to start actually by apologizing to the majority of our listeners because I found out a couple of days after I posted this podcast, a pretty regular listener, he goes by the screen name Humongous on YouTube, contacted us on Facebook and was like, "Hey, where's the podcast? I can't find it. It looks like it's blocked in Canada." And that was honestly bad enough because I take it personally that this podcast is blocked in the land of Mike Myers, the motherland. But then I found out that in fact it's blocked in the United States also. So I don't know where it's available. I don't know what countries you can watch it. But you definitely can't in North America. And now for this episode, if you're listening on YouTube, you'll be hearing the version with no copyrighted material in it, which is probably boring to listen to be perfectly honest. So if you want to hear the podcast as it's intended, the director's cut, then you can check us out on any number of places. dystopiandanceparty.com. You can stream straight from the website. We're on every podcast platform, I think at this point, Apple, Google, Stitcher, whatever all of the Android ones are. We're even on Spotify, actually, and they haven't kicked us off yet. So, in fact, I think we even got approved to be on Pandora. I don't know if we're still on Pandora yet or not. I don't keep that close track of it, but as far as I know, we're on like everything. So yeah, if you want to hear the non-bowdlerized YouTube censored version, then you can check us out in any of those other places, or you can just listen to this and it'll be shorter. So there's pros and cons either way. But I've got the YouTube analytics page open right now. It says 59% of our audience cannot view the video. So 41% of our audience is fine. But for the 59% who could not listen to the previous episode, my apologies. And also go back and check it out because I think it was pretty good.
It was also like our most complimentary since. Oh wait, I guess it followed directly after Wayne's World 2. But I guess
I feel like we were actually nicer about Austin Powers than about Wayne's World 2. I feel like I was a little harder on Wayne's World 2 actually.
Yeah, well, it was a sequel. This is also a sequel, and I have a lot less fuzzy feelings about this than I do. After watching this, and I guess we should say what we watched first.
Yeah, yeah.
We watched the second Austin Powers movie. What is it called?
Spy Who Shagged Me.
Okay.
Yes.
I was listening back to the first podcast, and I was saying that I blocked this movie out.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever saw this movie. Unless I really, really blocked it out, but I don't. I think I've seen before this viewing. I saw the first Austin Powers a lot of times because we owned it. Yeah. And I think I've seen Goldmember twice in my life. I don't think I've ever seen The Spy Who Shagged Me until now.
Interesting. I know you said that the Mustafa scene was ringing a bell, but I mean it's totally possible that you just saw that.
Up. I made that up because when I actually watched it, I had never seen that before in my life. So
it just seemed familiar.
I probably heard there's a lot of parts in this movie that I've heard probably like you, because I think you saw it with our parents, right? I've definitely heard y'all talking about it, but I have never seen it in my life until like last week.
Well, that'll be interesting because this is because this movie I saw many times as a teenager and then not at all until last week. So it's like two different relationships with the movie for sure. There's one comment. We didn't get as many comments this time because 59% of our audience didn't listen. But we did get one comment on the website. This is from Jukebox Cowboy, and I was really happy to see this comment because I feel like it kind of, we were like sort of trying to make this point, but we weren't articulating it very well. And Jukebox Cowboy articulated it much better. So thank you. He says, along with containing more subtle references to stuff like Andy Warhol's Factory, the first Austin Powers is more of a Brit Brit-pop movie with then current hit Brit-pop bands in the soundtrack like Space and Edwyn Collins. There's not a Madonna in earshot. And at the time, bands like Blur were celebrating, or at least commenting on, powers like Laddism with albums like Parklife. This is kind of what I had in my head when I was talking about the 90s being a time of 60s nostalgia. I was thinking about like a couple years after the first Austin Powers, the year that the second Austin Powers came out in 1999, me and my friend Brian, who dressed as Austin Powers on Picture Day, listened to the last episode for that story. And his mom and my mom all went to London. And it was kind of like in that Britpop this was, 99 was like late Britpop, but it was like in that era where it's like, diminishing returns swinging London kind of vibe. Like I definitely was able to buy an umbrella with the Union Jack on it, which was one of the things that I wanted. That was like, I got to get a Union Jack umbrella, this kind of like Austin Powers-y aesthetic, but filtered through a 90s sieve. So yeah, I think that was kind of like we were trying to get there, but like just didn't say the words Britpop.
Well, no, I mean that's a part of it. I think I articulated what I meant, which is like even there was that whole thing with the swinging London thing, but even just like the overall thing of the 90s was like
right.
Throwback, like even more blatantly than that. Like I mentioned, like D-Light was obviously doing that.
Right.
There was like fashion was doing that. Like it was very clear, and Britpop was a part of that, and certainly that's like an important part that we missed. But
right.
like if you look at the 90s, like what was on TV and what people were wearing and what was like popular, it was all 60s throwback, which I didn't realize at the time. But now looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that totally was a thing. When I was growing up, like that was my childhood. So it just seemed normal.
Right.
But it's weird looking back at how blatant it was and how Austin Powers fit like perfectly into that. And I think that's part of the reason it was so successful, because Mike Myers' niche interests fit into the zeitgeist at that particular time, and then it just got railroaded, and the whole fucking series was ruined.
I think this also kind of gets to something about, I guess, to kind of put my cards on the table. I did not hate Austin Powers 2 as much as I expected to on this viewing. And I think part of that is because my expectations were so low. Like we were saying last time, I don't think this is going to hold up. And it didn't hold up, but I found it like less cringe than I expected to, with some very major exceptions that we'll get into when we go into like the scene by scene. But the movie as a whole was pretty smooth sailing for me. But I do think that so many of the things that we liked about the first Austin Powers are just very fundamentally undermined in this movie. This is a much more mainstream film, a much more like of its time film. I was much more aware watching it that this was a product of the late 90s for all kinds of reasons that we'll get into. It was a much more American film too, which I think is another part of what the Jukebox Cowboys comment was, that, Austin Powers, even though it was made by an American director and a Canadian star/lead writer, it feels very English. It fits in with both what was happening, lampooning a specifically English version or British version of the 60s. And then it's also the references and the soundtrack and all that stuff are coming from what was going on in England in the UK in the 90s. Austin Powers 2 feels extremely American. It's almost like the Hollywood remake of the UK movie Austin Powers, even though they're both by the same people.
You know what it reminded me too, and before I forget, I know you said it wasn't as cringeworthy as we thought it was going to be. The only reason I wasn't cringing throughout is because I just can't feel anything anymore. I was just watching stone faced the entire time. I noticed about halfway through, because I watched this time I watched it alone. I was just like my boyfriend was busy, so I was just like, well, I'll just put this on because that's another thing. So as I mentioned before, I work full time now, so my days off are like precious to me, and the fact that I have to watch just one Mike Myers movie a month, and it cuts like an hour and a half into my day. it just really chaps my ass. It really bothers me. And so I put it on, and I was having a pretty good day. Like I cooked and stuff, and I was just like, let me just put Austin Powers on, just get this shit out of the way. I noticed about halfway through that I was just sitting there like stone-faced watching all these like goofy shenanigans go on, and I'm just sitting there like looking at my watch.
The moment for me, I was gonna save this for when we do like the scene by scene, but the moment for me, it was when Dr. Evil serenades Mini-Me with a cover of the Will Smith version of Just the Two of Us. By who is that? Grover Washington, I think. Anyway, it's Will Smith's Just the Two of Us, as performed by Dr. Evil with a bandana on his head. So I was watching that, and that was honestly one of the two scenes that I was really dreading, because I remembered it, because it basically traumatized me. And so I was watching it, and I just thought to myself, I wish that I was filming myself watching this, like, so that people could see how completely grim my expression is. Like it's just
maybe we should do this on Twitch,
like do a reaction.
Reaction, or just literally just stream ourselves watching it, and it would just be like an hour and a half of just us sitting there. Like the most grave expressions.
Yeah, I feel if we do that for the Love Guru, people are going to think we're watching like a Holocaust documentary or something.
I mean, it will be equally racist.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
First of all, a lot of my problem with this movie, like Dr. Evil was a funny character in the first movie. In this one, and like this kind of follows the Wayne's World 2 model of completely just almost point for point doing every single joke that's in the first movie, but making it more ridiculous, except less successful. Even, like Wayne's World 2 suffered from that. Austin Powers 2 just blows that completely out of the water.
The Urkelization of Dr. Evil is a problem in this movie. I felt like the first movie, he kind of stole the first movie too, but it's like him and Austin Powers were kind of like in perfect harmony in the first movie.
Right.
There was just enough of both.
And this one, they were like, oh, Dr. Evil is funny. Okay, let's make him real funny.
Right, exactly. And so now he has a little version of him, and now we see him fuck, which is like, who asked for this? Like, who asked for Dr. Evil stimulating his own nipples? Like, was this what the focus groups wanted for the first Austin Powers? Like, but let's back up a little bit. There's not as much background in this, because I basically the story behind the second Austin Powers is the first Austin Powers was kind of like this surprising success on home video. So a sequel got greenlit, and they were like, well, we want to do this again because it was fun and actually make money this time. So let's make a sequel. So Jay Roach came back, Mike Myers obviously came back. So this is a quote from The Independent. The article is called Groovy Baby, How Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me Became the Greatest Comedy Sequel of All Time. I will let that pass without comment. Jay Roach said, we decided to pull out all the stops and be as crazy and silly as a sequel should be. We knew we had to top it somehow, so we decided to go larger on the spectacle, the widescreen look, and of course the James Bond references. Spy Who Shagged Me had double the budget of the original film, which I believe. And it feels like a bigger, more mainstream Hollywood production. Jay Roach also said in this article that the first movie never tested well, meaning like audience screen tests. It never got above a 55 rating from the audience, which is so low. There was skepticism. People had expectations of Mike Myers because of SNL and Wayne's World. Not everybody was going along with this idea of the bad teeth, hairy body, and taking the piss out of Bond. But by the time we tested the second one, it was the opposite problem. They were so quick to embrace it that we actually had trouble figuring out what they liked. It seemed like they were laughing at everything. And that quote, that feels like it gets at a fundamental truth about The Spy Who Shagged Me. To me, it's like, this is just, the first one was, not for everybody. It was a little more of a niche thing. It was more of a cult movie. This one is just like lowest common denominator, easy, the jokes kind of hit you over the head, crowd pleasing, and I think that
you could take Austin Powers and Dr. Evil and all of the Austin Powers characters out of this and still have like 90% of the jokes, and it could be anybody's movie. The first one felt like an Austin Powers movie because it was like Austin Powers. This one you could put it could be any fucking comedy in the early 2000s, late 90s.
Yeah, and it only feels like an Austin Powers movie to the extent it does because it's aping the first Austin Powers. Like it's almost like a parody of the first Austin Powers. It just happened to be made by the same people. So of course it was a hit at the box office. It got the #1 spot in the opening weekend. I think actually taking the place of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. It grossed $54.9 million in that opening weekend, which was more than the entire gross of its predecessor. This was according to Wikipedia, so, grain of salt, etc. But this is supposedly the first movie sequel to do this. It set a record for a June opening and the biggest opening ever for a comedy. And it grossed $312 million worldwide. And I will say, I've been shitting on this movie, but I 100% drank the Kool-Aid that summer. I loved this movie when it was out. I'm sure I saw it multiple times, if not at the theater, then definitely once at the theater and then multiple times on video. And I probably saw it multiple times at the theater. I thought it was better than the first when I saw it. In my defense, I was 15 years old and I hadn't become pretentious yet. And I think most people who liked Austin Powers, this is very anecdotal, but I think most people who liked Austin Powers liked the second one. I feel like it was the third one where a lot of people rebelled. But it was like, this movie, I loved it at the time, but it had a bad aftertaste. Like it was like by the time I got around to that second and third and fourth watch, it was like, is it really funny when Austin Powers drinks a mug of hot shit? Or is it a reflex that I'm laughing at that? You know what I mean? Like, it really soured. It did not age well, even within the couple of years after it came out. I will just say a couple more things in terms of background. One thing that I forgot to mention for the first movie is every one of these movies, I like to pull out like a behind the scenes diva moment, like him not getting along with Penelope Spheris in Wade's World, or him doing the woman poem ad nauseum and, making everybody have nightmares about it for So I Married an Axe Murderer. And I realized when we were talking about Austin Powers that I hadn't found a story like that. And I haven't found one for Austin Powers 2 either. These, honestly, if nothing else, I feel like these movies, he was in a good place emotionally. And it seemed like everybody had fun making these movies. And there aren't any like stories about Mike Myers being a ridiculous tyrant on set. So that's kind of interesting. It's a little disappointing also because that's one of my favorite parts. But I feel like Cat in the Hat alone is going to make up for that. And then the last thing that I want to say before we get to the scene by scene, but also our metrics, our minutes to Mike and Mike proof, just a quick interesting little thing from Wikipedia. In the UK, there were multiple variations of the posters because shag is like a bad word there. So some of them asterisked out the word shag, a couple of letters. Other posters just called it Austin Powers 2. And according to the Collins English Dictionary, the use of the word shag in this film's title helped to increase its acceptability in the UK, reducing its shock value and giving it a more jocular, relaxed connotation. So if nothing else, The Spy Who Shagged Me did accomplish one thing, which was by making it okay to say shag in the UK. And then also Wikipedia informed me that Singapore considered a title change to The Spy Who Shioked Me. Shiok derives from the Malay word siok, which means to feel good. So if that ever comes up in trivia, you're welcome. All right. So our metrics. This is respectable, but not amazing minutes to Mike. We have 1:30 and we hear Dr. Evil's laugh. So audio. And then 1:49, we see Austin on screen. So audio-wise, we hear Mike a lot faster in the first Austin Powers, just 39 seconds. But then it's not until 1:41 that we see his face. So it's give and take. I feel like it's a wash there. I will say, though, that this is far and away the highest Mike proof we're talking 235 to 245, over 100% mic content. And that is, of course, because there are so many scenes where there are multiple mics on screen. I knew this was going to happen because I remembered that he plays not only Austin Powers and Dr. Evil, but also Fat Bastard. But actually, I feel like the thing that pushes it over the edge is not even Fat Bastard. It's the fact that this is a time travel movie. So there, at some point late in the film, are multiple Austin Powers. I don't think this is the best Mike Myers movie. I would still say either the original Austin Powers or the original Wayne's World are at this point your best bet for an enjoyable night or afternoon or whatever watching Mike Myers. But if you want the most Mike Myers for your money or for your time, this is it right now. This is the most Mike Myers we've experienced. So this movie picks up right after the first one leaves off. We have the Dr. Evil's big boy ship re-entering orbit of the Earth. It deposits. There's this very convoluted, this movie, there's a lot of like jumping through hoops to get to jokes. You can feel the movie straining to make the joke happen. And that starts right here with the big boy. For some reason, its ass opens. And then an egg-shaped ship comes out of the ass. It's like, why? I guess because butts are funny. Like, and so the escape pod comes out.
This is also where the budget really shows because they have this ridiculous like CGI big boy's ass opening up
right
scene. It's completely unnecessary.
We have the Bond parody, also the Star Wars parody.
Oh
Hollywood
yeah, the stupid fucking text at the beginning is Star Wars. It doesn't make any goddamn sense. That's just another one of those things. It's just like a joke for a joke's sake.
Right.
It makes me mad. I hate when people use the Star Wars font. It actually makes me angry.
So like the reason why is, I remember this when I was reading the Independent article. This famously had the same opening weekend as Star Wars: The Phantom Menace, and back then, like a new Star Wars movie was a huge deal. That was going to be like the movie event, and I remembered. I didn't remember until I read the article. But I remembered that they referenced that in the trailers. And so they really kind of beat the Star Wars thing to death. And then,
right. I mean, that actually does make it a little bit
more makes it timely, but your point is still taken because I feel like this just shows how much more broad the second Austin Powers is. Because the first one was very, very specific. It was like, we're parodying mid-60s England and like, old British comedies and James Bond. And like, that's basically it. Like maybe there's a little bit more here and there, but I feel like Star Wars doesn't fit in Austin Powers universe. Star Trek, maybe, because it was on TV in the mid 60s.
Star Wars is just but honestly, something like everyone. Yeah, like Star Wars is just like low hanging fruit at this point. Yeah. And like, I guess I'll just say this now because I don't know if it'll fit anywhere else in our discussion. But I like one of my biggest problems with this movie in particular, and a little bit of the second Wayne's World, but not as much, is that a lot of it is just jokes for joke's sake.
Yeah, and it goes against all of the things that we said were like what made the first movie great, which was that it was like extremely specific. It was unafraid to be narrow, and this just goes so broad.
And that even if it's not something niche, I think narrowing down the reasons why like the like world that the humor exists works every single time. If you're just saying something funny for the sake of saying something funny, it's always stupid. It never fits in to
it's like it's just annoying. Like a scary movie, right, it's like that level of comedy. The lesser Wayans brothers, it's not even the good Wayans brothers, like I'm gonna get you sucker.
Yeah, because I'm gonna get you sucker is extremely specific.
Right. So after Dr. Evil comes back and this whole Star Wars thing, then it's like looking through my notes, it's just funny. It says a lot that my notes are like, now there's the Swedish penis enlarger again, and then here's the naked dance thing again. And it's like, honestly, the first 20 minutes of the movie is like going through all of the gags from the first movie.
I remember, speaking of just to catch you up, let's just skip past the beginning. Basically, spoiler, Vanessa is a fembot, and they're on their honeymoon, and then she starts like short-circuiting. That was kind of funny.
That's funny, yeah.
And then it's revealed that everyone knew that Vanessa was a fembot and just let this happen, which casts a completely different view of especially the last like half of Austin Powers 1. Then it just springs right into a dance scene. This time, though, Austin Powers is completely nude. And I remember that I texted you, and I was like, first fucking 5 minutes of the movie, we see Mike Myers naked, just FYI.
Yeah. I will say, and this was in my notes, that the placement of the credits, because this is the credit sequence, the placement of the credits spares us his ass crack because the words are always over his ass.
Or they blurred his ass crack, which I was interested in that just because where were those fucking blur lines in So I Married an Axe Murderer? We saw his whole ass on screen for like 30 seconds.
I think our theory was correct, and the MPAA changed their rules after. So it's the Mike Myers rule. After So I Married an Axe Murderer, they were like, we're never going to let a pasty Canadian ass get on the screen in a PG-13 film anymore. Yeah, so this is both like talking about, regurgitating or recycling gags. This is a combination of the dance sequence at the beginning of the first movie. They're using Soul Bossa Nova again, with the multiple scenes in the first movie where he's walking around naked behind strategically placed objects. And it is funny.
Honestly, I think that this would be funny if the part leading up to it was funny and if the parts after it were funny. Like
you have to earn this.
Yeah, like that's the thing is like the dance part in the first one was probably my favorite part of the movie. Like that was the part that really made me laugh the most. This part is like, okay, but like, I don't know, you like build up this relationship with Vanessa. You kind of like her as a character. And then it turns out she's a fembot. So this movie, and I guess this is kind of a good part to discuss this too, is like, this one seemed a lot more like sexist than the first movie.
Yeah.
Not in a James Bond parody sexism, which is what the first one seemed like. This one was just like early 2000s sexist comedy movie sexist.
Yeah, I kind of touched on this when we were talking about Elizabeth Hurley in the last movie. And it's like, I intellectually understand why they do what they do to her in the second movie, because it's the whole Bond thing. It's like, and in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, at the end of it, James Bond gets married, and then Blofeld, the bad guy, Dr. Evil, basically has her killed. And so it's like, I get that this is part of their like, it's a Bond parody and it's a reference and all that stuff. I understand why it happens, but it's still a bummer because Elizabeth Hurley is funny. And I just liked her presence in the first movie. I think she had good chemistry with Mike Myers, which is an achievement to have, especially if you're as beautiful a woman as Elizabeth Hurley. And I just think that it's a bummer that she's not in the movie. And it's a bummer that they replaced her with, of all people, Heather Graham, who, I'm sure she's a lovely woman. She is not good in this movie. She is so bad, and it's just like it just feels like such a downgrade from Vanessa. And there's other, it is kind of like, again, it's referencing a specific trope, but it still feels kind of like, well, we can't have a monogamous Austin Powers, boys have to be boys, like we gotta.
Well, it wasn't only that idea. Yeah, it was like that she's disposable. Yeah, he pretty much said that she's disposable. Like, it wasn't, I don't care about any of these characters, but that was zoom like in on Austin Powers example to me that this was going to be a shittier movie to women than the first one was.
Yeah.
But the first one, it seemed like a parody. It seemed like it was making fun of the uber sexism of the James Bond movies. And this was just kind of like falling right into not even like 60s sexism, but like specifically early 2000s comedy sexism, which is a whole like subset.
Right. I do think that there is like more of a nastiness throughout the movie. I think the part that always struck me as jarring was when he first goes back to the 60s and there's that character Robin Swallows. So first of all, there's the name, which like, yeah, I get it. You know, it's Pussy Galore, Bond girl, double entendre. She says her maiden name was Spitz. It's like, you know, and then he uses her as a human shield, which again it's a Bond reference because I was actually, like I said, this winter I was watching a lot of the old Bond movies, and he does that in Thunderball. Like he sees an assassin when he's dancing, and Sean Connery as James Bond uses the woman as a human shield. She's not she's not innocent. She's a double agent or whatever. But it's still like, I was like, damn, even for 1965, that's misogynistic. So like, I got that that's what they were referencing, but then like they keep escalating it, and then it's like she gets shot with a bazooka, and he uses her as a human shield again, and it's like it's kind of funny because of the absurdity of it, but it's also like, damn, like this is mean. Like
honestly, that when they kept escalating the guns, that part was kind of funny to me. The part that was kind of gross to me is when he was just like, "Why won't you die?"
Right.
now I'm laughing at it.
Right. It's just kind of ghoulish. I don't know. It always stuck out. I remembered it. I didn't remember it before, but when I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, this part always just felt a little like tonally weird to me, like yeah. It bums you out a little bit in the middle of the movie. Anyway, yeah, the new credits, I it's funny. My favorite part is where he's, for some reason, he's dancing in front of a baby carriage, and there's like a pinwheel spinning in front of his junk, and the pinwheel blows away, and he continues to dance. And then the baby's head pops up, and he makes this face like, uh-oh, a baby just saw my dick. And it's like, what did you think was going to happen? Like, he was doing it for like a full 30 seconds.
I thought that part was weird too. And I think it's not even that the baby saw his dick, is that the mom saw him.
Yeah, he didn't even care about the baby. It was that he was caught showing his dick to a baby. So anyway, it was fine. I will just say in general, I didn't laugh as much in this movie, but at this point, I'm not completely like stone faced like I am later. From
minute 1 to minute however many minutes are in this movie, 120 or however many.
So then after we get those repeats, then we get the repeat of the whole NATO thing.
NATO is just watching Jerry Springer for some reason.
Yeah, that's the joke, that he's watching Jerry Springer. The theme of the episode is "My father is evil, wants to take over the world." That's the funniest part about it. Just that
was funny. Is that's
right.
of the show. And that the reason they know Dr. Evil is back is because he just appears on Jerry Springer. That was funny to me. And then it just goes too far.
Yeah, I honestly expected to be super cringing in the Jerry Springer parody because I read about it. I read that article. I had forgotten about it until then. And I was like, oh, shit. Dr. Evil and Scott go on Jerry Springer. This is going to be hard to watch. And it wasn't hard to watch. But I think it really dates the movie. Like, this is kind of what I was talking about, where this feels more like a movie of its time than the first Austin Powers. So much of this movie is like stuff that people only cared about in the late 90s. Jerry Springer was like such a 1999 thing to make fun of. The fact that Dr. Evil, now his front corporation is no longer VirtueCon, it's now Starbucks. Like, that whole idea of Starbucks being like the worst thing in the world, like the only thing about capitalism that anybody is mad about, that is a very 1999 concept. Now it's like, honestly, Starbucks doesn't feel any better. Like, who's gonna waste time being mad about Starbucks when there's Amazon? You know what I mean? There's a Rebecca Romaine cameo that's extremely 1999. The only thing that's less dated about it is that she doesn't introduce herself as Rebecca Romaine Stamos. And then like the whole thing about Mini-Me, the late 90s was a weird like renaissance for dwarfs. Like, Kid Rock had his little guy.
I forgot about that.
What was it? Jackass. There was a little guy in Jackass. And then, of course, Vern Troyer. I don't think Renaissance is the right word because, like, I feel like nowadays you have like Peter Dinklage, like, actually does acting. He's not just like a court jester for yeah, exactly. So honestly, now is probably a better time for little people. But in terms of little people visibility, the late 90s was wild. I don't know what was in the water.
Little people visibility at the expense.
Little people minstrelsy, I think, is probably the better word. But so, I mean, there's just so many things about this movie that just feel like this is a 1999 film. And I don't feel that way as much, even though the first Austin Powers is also a product of its time, but it doesn't feel as dated. Like, just the fact that there's a Jerry Springer parody in this immediately dates it as coming from the late 90s. It's like that and Girls Gone Wild. Like, those were the things to parody, you know?
Yeah, and it was like the first sign that there's going to be too much fucking Dr. Evil in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. And he's no longer, he no longer makes sense as a character. He does whatever needs to be done on screen to get you to laugh, Dr. Evil is going to do. Like, he's no longer a coherent character on any level. Then we're basically have plot stuff going on. Austin Powers is apparently his day job is still a fashion photographer, so he's doing that. That's when Rebecca Romaine shows up. There's also the character Ivana Humpalot, which is basically just a lot of vagina again. And we're basically, at this point, we're cross-cutting between Austin and Dr. Evil because Dr. Evil has this plan to go back in time and steal Austin Powers' mojo, because apparently that's the reason why Austin Powers always defeats him, because he has this sex appeal, the thing that makes Austin Powers, which Dr. Evil doesn't have, which in this case is an actual liquid called mojo. I guess this is kind of clever because at this point, Austin is, again, doing the exact same scene as a lot of vagina one from the first movie, but with Ivana Humpalot. I did kind of think it's funny, I guess, just as a brief detour. I did think the part where they were like taking turns filleting chess pieces and it got more and more ridiculous was like fun. Kind of funny. Yeah.
I mean, everything is relative.
I mean, like,
it wasn't hilarious.
It wasn't the great, but yeah, it was fine. And then they're in bed, and at the moment that his mojo gets stolen, he basically, it's implied that he can't get an erection, and that's how he realizes that his mojo is gone. I don't know how they then draw the conclusion that Dr. Evil went back in time. That seems like a little bit of a leap, but there's a lot of things in this movie that we're not going to get hung up on because it's just like stuff has to happen for plot reasons. Somewhere in all of this, because it's very much going back and forth between Austin in the present and Dr. Evil in the past, there's just a lot of like retreading past glories. Like, there's the whole scene, Dr. Evil is saying "zip it" to Scott, and it's just the shush scene from the first movie again, but not as funny. And then there's the evil laugh scene, and they do the evil laugh that goes on too long, just like the first movie again, but not as funny.
I'm just exhausted thinking about it.
Yeah. I guess a couple other notable things. Robert Wagner's character number 2 is played by Rob Lowe in the past.
That's kind of funny.
I guess it's good casting. I can't.
Thumbs up.
Yeah.
We like that.
And the person who steals Austin's mojo, I guess we should observe is Fat Bastard.
Why? Why?
Yeah, I don't understand why. I guess, okay, so the reason why it's Fat Bastard is because he's apparently a mole that they have planted in the facility which is guarded by this like Scottish guard.
Why? You know why? So
I don't have an answer.
No, I do.
Oh yeah, I do actually.
Can do a fucking Scottish accent.
Oh my God.
Why? That's the only reason why. Guess what?
I'm so
next
tired
we're
of it.
gonna do Shrek.
I know.
You know who was supposed to be Shrek? Chris Farley. Can you imagine how much funnier Shrek would be with Chris Farley in the fucking Scottish accent again?
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm already so tired of that Scottish accent, and we haven't even watched the first of 4 Shreks.
I was looking again at the list of the movies. A third is all Shrek. a third of the movies that we're gonna watch is our fucking Shrek movie.
Yeah, so Fat Bastard, what can we say about Fat Bastard? Like, I did think it was kind of funny. I in that Independent article, I just liked the way this quote was structured. It said, in recent years, the character, an overweight assassin who spends an entire scene trying to eat Mini-Me, has fallen out of favor with some fans who argue that the film directly links his appearance with the negative traits he possesses. So, I mean, yes, Fat Bastard is fat phobic. It's a joke at the expense of fat people. I'm not someone who gets like super bent out of shape about, you know, a lot of comedy is politically correct, right? And it can be egregious or not. I'm not like offended by Fat Bastard. I do think it's a fucking stupid character.
Yeah, I feel like your outrage at, like, certainly he's fat phobic, but I feel like my brain can't even get to being offended at it being fat phobic because I already hate, like, my capacity for hatred and anger at the existence of this character is at capacity before I even get to how offensive he is.
Yeah, he's just a repulsive character on every level. And it's not even because he's fat. It's
not because he's fat. It's not because he's supposed to be ugly. It's not because he's disgusting. It just, like, honestly, for me, it's just his, like, complete, there's no point for him to be in this movie.
It's just so
except
stupid.
A vehicle for a fucking Scottish accent. That's where I leave off. Like, I can't hate him anymore after that.
I hate the way he shakes like you can tell he's coming because the entire screen shakes. It's like an 8-year-old came up with this character. Like, it's just the lowest hanging fruit, which I get is like part of the joke. Like, the joke is that he's called Fat Bastard and he's just a big fat joke. But it's just like, okay, so if the joke is that it's a dumb joke, it's still a dumb fucking joke. Like, you know, it's not like suddenly it's brilliant, you know, like it's conceptual now. I just don't like Fat Bastard.
Well, it's another one of those jokes for a joke's sake thing where it like doesn't make any sense. It's just like, oh, I want to put a Scottish accent in here. Okay, let me write a stupid character and a stupid joke around the fact that I want to make a Scottish accent. Here it is. It's just dumb.
And this is also just, to me, emblematic of the decline in Austin Powers characters, because, you know, the first movie we get Dr. Evil. The second movie we get Dr. Evil with his brain removed and Fat Bastard. And then in the third movie we get what I can only assume is an even dumber Dr. Evil, Fat Bastard again, and then Goldmember, who, as we discussed last time, is just the worst in every way. So we haven't quite hit rock bottom yet. One thing I'll say is that he is the source of a lot of this movie's new catchphrases, which, again, I counted the catchphrases. I came to 22 for the first Austin Powers. This one, I got to 25. And, you know, the line between what is and is not a catchphrase is thin, especially in a Mike Myers movie. Like, for example, I wrote down Mike Myers' laugh as a catchphrase because I feel like he does that loud barking laugh much more in this movie. It started to have the feel of like, oh, this is a joke. There were also times where like something that didn't seem like a catchphrase in the first movie retroactively turned into a catchphrase. Like, there's a part that is referencing the scene where he's in the steamroller and he's yelling for the guy to move, and he's just standing there screaming from the first movie. And in this one, it's like he gets in a vehicle and he immediately starts going, move, move, move. So it's like, oh, I guess that's a catchphrase now. Like, I didn't think of it as one, but I guess it is. It's like when you take a joke out of context, it then becomes a catchphrase. Right. Exactly. So yeah, exactly. Dumb. Which is like the whole core of Mike Myers' comedy since the turn of the millennium. But Fat Bastard is the source of several of these new catchphrases. He sings the entire Chili's baby back ribs commercial, which, all right, this actually brings me to another point. And I realize that this is going to make me sound like a stickler and like I'm no fun. But this is all taking place in 1969. Fat Bastard is not from 1999. Fat Bastard is from 1969. How does he know the Chili's baby back ribs commercial, which did not air until I don't have the exact date, but it was definitely until after Chili's was founded, which I'm pretty sure was in the mid-90s.
Maybe the baby back ribs song predates Chili's. Maybe Fat Bastard wrote the baby back ribs song and
about a baby,
and Chili's co-opted it for their baby back ribs.
I mean, I'm willing to accept that, if only because it'll make me stop thinking about it. But there's a lot of things in this movie where I was also constantly frustrated by Dr. Evil's pop culture knowledge, because he goes back and forth between not knowing, like they do a lot of the same jokes about, like, from the first movie, of him not knowing post 1967 pop culture. Like, he calls his evil plan this time the Death Star. And so it's like, okay, he's never seen Star Wars. He has no idea that Star Wars exists, but he quotes Jerry Maguire. And he also references Independence Day. And then he also uses like a bunch of hip hop slang. The only thing that I could come up with that maybe is an explanation is that he was actually working his way backwards and just hadn't gotten to the 80s and 70s yet. But I feel like that's giving it too much credit.
Okay, the most glaring example of fucked up timeline, why is Elvis Costello in this?
Yes! Oh my God, I forgot to mention that. As he would
appear in the late 90s, but in the 60s playing a Burt Bacharach.
Right. When he was what, like 5 years old? Right. And then and then Burt Bacharach is old. How is Burt Bacharach an old man in 1969?
All they had to do was make that scene appear in the 90s, and it would have made sense.
Right.
Why did Austin Powers take contemporary Elvis Costello and Burt Bacharach back with him to the 60s to play?
Is this a butterfly effect thing where he's like, there's like an instability in the timeline, like, creating all these paradoxes? And this is honestly, I was disappointed with every aspect of the 1969, because, you know, we talked about this, like, admittedly, I was not alive in the 60s, but as somebody who consumed a lot of 60s pop culture, the 1967 from the first movie felt spot on. And this one, like, it feels like it's just 1967, and I don't think that that's accurate to the way that, you know, like, the end of the 60s and the middle of the 60s were almost two different decades. And it's like they kind of get it a little bit. Like, one thing that I enjoyed was in the first movie, Basil Exposition back in the 60s had like a Brian Jones haircut, basically. And in this one, they obviously that would be anachronistic. So now he has like big mutton chops. That was a good, like, that felt like, yes, that is what Basil Exposition's hair would look like in 1969. But everything else, it just felt like they made it 2 years later because Austin would be frozen, but it just didn't feel authentic. Nobody's hair was long. The music they were listening, I mean, American Woman, like, okay.
Well, also, the first movie made more sense because they were playing British psychedelic music.
Right.
In this one, It was all American music that was just kind of like whatever they would play on the oldie station that was from the late 60s. It was just like, what, Steppenwolf and the Guess Who.
Right.
Like, it wasn't anything specific to that time and place.
It's like everything that is the opposite of what we were praising the original Austin Powers for. It feels like a cartoon version of the 60s.
Also, I'm a Believer by the Monkees appears in this. I'm a Believer covered by Smash Mouth appears in the next movie we're about to watch. So that's a fun little connection I made.
That is fun. And this is not, I'm jumping around because I just saw it in my notes and because this is relevant. But at one point in the movie, Fat Bastard, for some reason, talks about a donkey. So it's like a weird
I made that connection too.
Yeah, it's like a weird glimpse through the wormhole of Shrek.
Someone mentions the donkey, the next movie you watch is gonna have a donkey in it.
So yeah, we're getting another case of the foreshadowing. Anyway, back to the Back to the storyline. So 1969, this is where he meets Heather Graham. There's also a weird Heineken product placement. And I remember Austin Powers being in Heineken commercials at this time. And then they also put it in the movie where he's like, get your hands off my Heine or whatever. This is also where Robin Swallows shows up and dies horribly. And then Felicity saves him. She's like a CIA agent or an whatever the American agency is that they give her in this movie. One thing that I felt like is a very Mike Myers joke, reminded me of like in Wayne's World, the body doubles were in England, was where they drove out and there was a sign that said English countryside. And it was like very obviously Southern California. And then Austin Powers said, isn't it amazing how the English countryside looks just like Southern or looks nothing like Southern California or something like that. That felt very Mike Myers.
That was actually funny too. That was a success. Yeah. That was I laughed at that.
Yeah, that felt like the first Austin Powers joke.
One corner of my mouth went up. Like...
Mustafa shows up again. We talked about Will Ferrell in Brownface last time. This is the scene that I mentioned last time where he has to be asked a question 3 times. It was funny. It's,
this part was funny too.
Yeah. Because at least they're doing something slightly different. Like, I mean, then he falls off the cliff and he does the exact same thing he does in the first movie where he's seemingly dead, but then is still alive. But even that
would have been
pretty
funny
strong joke.
Well, and also if it hadn't been so like they spent so much time on it and they spent so much time on Austin's reaction to it. Like if it had just started and Austin walked away and that was it, just like, oh, okay, that's a throwback, whatever. It's over.
Right.
It would have been funny and then moving on. But they like belabor every fucking joke. That's part of the reason stuff isn't funny because they belabor it.
This part starts to get kind of murky to me because I don't fully understand why things are happening from this point forward, basically. I understand that, Austin is investigating the disappearance of his mojo. So he visits the cryogenic chamber with Felicity. Okay, I get it. One thing I will note is that I'm pretty sure that the frozen Austin Powers is a body double. So I was initially going to count this as a 2 mic scene, but I think it's only a 1 mic scene.
2 Austins, 1 mic.
2 Austins, 1 mic, exactly. So they visit the cryogenic chamber. They don't really come to any conclusions. And then he and Felicity go on a shopping montage. I'm like, what? Why does this? It just feels like we need to do something like the Las Vegas sequence in the first Austin Powers. So here you go. Like it doesn't make sense to me. Meanwhile, kind of glossed over this, and maybe that's not a bad thing. One of the things that this movie does is retcon Scott the circumstances of his conception / birth. And it's funny because I was saying when we were recording the first podcast that I thought it was a funny concept that he was created as like this evil villain plan, like freezing Dr. Evil's sperm and then creating him in a test tube in case he never came back. Like, I thought that was a funny concept. This one, they're like, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to make Dr. Evil fuck. And it's like...
Well, because the reason... There's not a reason, but the scenario...
He drinks the mojo, right? Yeah.
He drinks Austin's mojo, and then it makes him really horny, I guess. And they have like this... It's, again, another stupid belabored joke where, like, they play... Let's Get It On. And
which again, like, how is Let's Get It On in 1969? That song is from 1973. Did Dr. Evil bring it back? like what? Again, I know that this makes me sound like I'm nitpicking, but I feel like it speaks to the sloppiness of this movie compared to the first one. Dusty Springfield, The Look of Love, is a hyper specific reference, and it's like correct in terms of the time and place and like the mood. Everything about it is perfect. Let's Get It On is like bog standard, I'm not shitting on Marvin Gaye, but I just mean like that song as a cue for these two people are gonna fuck. That's like the most obvious choice.
Yeah, like there's that, and that's part of the reason I was saying like this, you could remove the characters and the plot and it wouldn't make a difference. This could be any fucking movie. there's that. And then also, I feel like if you're going to make a movie that's specifically about the 60s and then time travel to the 90s, and then in the sequel have it be from the 90s back to the 60s, you should at least get the fucking dates of music right. Like, that's the least you could do. I don't expect like extensive research in a Mike Myers comedy, but the least you could do is get the dates on songs so that they make any fucking sense.
Right. So, bunch of plot. They apparently conceive Scott. Then also Scott arrives in the past. Then we have kind of like a repeat or like an inversion of the... I actually thought this was kind of interesting. I don't know how much credit to give it because I think it's also just recycling the plot of the first movie. But, you know, the whole conflict between Austin and Vanessa in the first movie revolved around him seducing a lot of vagina and her like viewing that as a betrayal and, you know, was angry at him. And then he has to like deal with that and he apologizes and then they come together in the end. And in this, it's the exact opposite. Felicity just doing her job as a spy seduces fat bastard and shoves a tracker up his ass. And then he feels betrayed. In
this one, the role reversal wasn't that Austin was upset with infidelity. It was that he was upset that she fucked an ugly fat guy before he fucked her. That was it. Because he can't have sex right now, I guess, because, I don't know, stupid. Because I guess his mojo is preventing him from getting a boner, but you'll later find out that is completely meaningless.
Right. So, in between all of this, Dr. Evil, in addition to stealing Austin's mojo, he wants to hold the Earth ransom again. We talked about this last time. They do it backwards, and it doesn't, the $1 million joke, they do it backwards, and it doesn't quite work because now he asks for, or it works, but it's just not as funny because now he asks for $100 billion, and they laugh at him because they're like, that's an unimaginable amount of money. Like, okay, the project he initially calls the Death Star, then he calls it the Alan Parsons Project. It's a laser on the moon that's going to blow up Washington, D.C. The Alan Parsons Project joke is much funnier than the Death Star. I will say that.
Yeah.
And much more understandable that he wouldn't know, because I feel like somebody who was frozen in 67 and unfrozen in 97 would probably know what Star Wars is, but it's totally understandable that they would not know what the Alan Parsons Project was.
Right.
So, all right. So now we get to the shit. I understand intellectually what is happening here. Felicity shoved this tracker up fat bastard's ass.
Okay, wait, let me say something about this because I was thinking about this. Why does she need to shove a tracker up his ass if she found him to have sex with him and put the tracker up his ass? Obviously, he's out here. You can find him if you can track him down to be able to track him down with an ass tracker.
Right.
How'd you find him to have sex with him, stick a tracker up his ass if you then need to track him? And then there was no point in tracking. Like, why were they even tracking him?
I guess the idea is that he would lead them back to his like base.
Okay, then why didn't she just chill with him and go back to Dr. Evil's base then?
I don't know.
It would have worked better because he ends up shitting the tracker out anyway.
Yeah, so the tracker like pings and they're like, "Oh, he's at Paddington Station." So they go and find him, and he left like a huge shit in the toilet at Paddington Station.
Because he's fat. And then babies.
Yeah, right.
Hilarious.
Exactly. Fat people shit all the time. And fun fact: fat people's shit smells worse than.
Well, it does if they eat babies, which they do.
This is where this really, because I didn't even think about the like, why did she need to track him thing at the time. This is where the thread of logic loses me. Like, okay, so the end result makes sense because when they analyze the shit, they find out that there's like this plant that's indigenous to only one island, and they track him to Dr. Evil's lair. So I understand why the movie needs them to analyze Fat Bastard shit.
I didn't even get that.
They do explain. Like, they explained it after the fact. What I don't understand, what I don't understand is why they saw this shit and are like, we need to do a stool sample.
Right.
Again, if you're working backwards from the end, it's like, yeah, well, they need to do a stool sample so they can find Dr. Evil's base. But why would they assume that Dr. Evil's base would be traceable from the contents of Fat Bastard shit? It doesn't make sense. Why would that even occur to a spy? Am I not cut out for spy work? Is this obvious to everyone else? And I am just the dummy? It just doesn't make sense to me. And then, of course, all of this leads to the scene. Austin walks into the base there's so many things. There's so many things here. For some reason, he has a coffee cup in the room where they're doing a stool sample.
He brings the whole coffee pot in there and puts it right next to the stool sample. Why didn't he just pour his coffee elsewhere? Why would you even want to be drinking coffee in a room where there's a whole boiling pot of shit? Okay, TMI, but I, in the last 5 years, have had to do a stool sample.
Okay.
It doesn't smell pleasant. You can smell that when shit is outside of the toilet.
Right.
It smells
like shit. Yeah.
Like shit, unmistakably. There is no fucking way. There's no way. He even mentions the smell, and he says this coffee smells like shit. You would know.
Here's a question about stool samples. Was your stool as hot coffee? That's another thing that
I wasn't in the Quest Diagnostics room, so maybe that's what they did. Maybe they boiled it.
Yeah, I don't know what the process is. I
doubt it.
I feel like you probably don't need to bring shit to boiling temperature to get a sample. But again, I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Maybe this actually does make sense. But I'm very confused why the shit is as hot as coffee. I'm very confused why it's in a coffee carafe that he could mistake for a coffee pot. I'm confused by the fact that it clearly smells. But as he lifts it to his nose, he says this coffee smells like shit, but that usually doesn't mean literally.
Can you imagine?
Even bad coffee just smells like coffee.
Can you imagine how bad boiling shit would smell? It would be horrible. Especially since they went into the they smelled it room temperature. Right. They went into the bathroom at Paddington Station and they mentioned the smell there. And then they went and boiled it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any goddamn sense. This part, this is another one where it's it doesn't make me mad because it offends me. It just makes me mad because it's so goddamn stupid that it infuriates me.
And this scene has really haunted me. There's two scenes that I witnessed in theaters in the late 90s that as hard as I've tried, I've never been able to shake off. The first one is this. And I think at the time I must have at least thought it was inoffensive, if not funny. But later it just sends my cringe meter through the roof. And then he says it's nutty. It's it's so stupid. Why would it be nutty?
Why would it be nutty?
I don't know. I'm not above a shit joke, but man. And then he has the shit mustache. It's just a grown man thought of this, and it just makes me
a grown man thought. This is what
upset.
bothers me is that they all there's witnesses.
They all agreed. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
There's Basil Exposition is in the room. Whatever the fuck her name is in the room. And then there's a bunch of technicians. None of the technicians, nobody said, oh, don't drink that. Not that they should need
what Basil
to.
Says is,
let's just pretend. Yeah, let's just pretend that whatever. That Austin Powers is such a fucking idiot that he would drink shit out of a mug. So let's suspend our disbelief to that. Wouldn't somebody be oh no, don't drink that. Nobody says boo. Yeah. They just let him do it and then just kind of look at him ugh. Yeah, right. You just let this grown man drink shit in front of you. Yeah, it's disgusting. Why the fuck did you say anything? Why is he even allowed to just prance into a laboratory with a coffee mug and just be drinking in there? You shouldn't even be able to bring food and drink in there. At the very least. Anyway, we need to move on because we'll never
I'll never get off this because, like I said, this has been haunting me for 20 years now. The other movie that's haunted me is The Nutty Professor 2: The Clumps, where he has a dream sequence. The Nutty Professor has a dream sequence that he's in space, and he needs to get something across the room, I guess, and he's in zero gravity, so he farts across the room. Because fat people fart. Fat people are extremely flatulent. Just another fact about fat people. He farts and it propels him across the room. And I like Eddie Murphy in a fat suit farting across the room has haunted me for so many years. It's good. It's gonna be one of the, like, when I'm dying and my life flashes before my eyes. It's gonna be, you know, like my childhood, like various traumas. Like my first kiss, losing my virginity, you know, the birth of my child, Austin Powers drinking shit, Eddie Murphy in a fat suit farting across a spaceship.
I'll sadly also have like some fucking Rob Schneider in there too, because I realized the other day that I've seen Deuce Bigelow, Mel Jiggle like twice in as many years, and I don't know why.
That is one thing we can comfort ourselves with, that at least we're doing Mike Myers and not Rob Schneider or Adam Sandler, to be honest. Like, the one good thing, I guess, about the whole shit sequence is now they know where to find Dr. Evil. So Austin and Felicity go there. Sure. Yeah, they do like the Dr. No thing where she's in a bikini and then Austin's in a bikini for some reason. And then like it's cutting back and forth to them infiltrating the base and Dr. Evil and Mini-Me in the base. For some reason, Dr. Evil is playing a piano and Mini-Me is sitting on the piano with like a baby piano. And they're playing What If God Was One of Us by Joan Osborne for some reason. And this is another thing where it's like, this man did not know what the Death Star was, and yet somehow he is familiar with Joan Osborne singles. Like, I don't get it. Like, why? Why did this happen? Like, what is going on? And then we cut back to Austin and Felicity. They're in this tent. And they do this like silhouette gag, this prop comedy, which is actually, I thought this was probably the best like new gag in the movie. Not that it has a lot of competition, but they're lit from the back, so you see their silhouettes, and she's like digging. He's bent over for some reason. It's very contrived. Like every joke is like it has to jump through 6 different hoops to get to the part where it's a joke. But he's bending over looking at through something, and she's looking through this bag that's like basically at his ass level. So it looks from the outside like she's reaching into his ass and pulling things out. You know, I'm a simple man. I can enjoy a joke about stuff being pulled out of a man's ass.
Hated
and then,
it.
You know, like
next.
Well, but here's the problem, because the next scene is the just the two of us scene that we alluded to, which this is like, I was dreading this. I remembered it. It's triggering to me. It ticks so many boxes, like the completely superfluous parody. You know, this is like something one of the lesser Wayans brothers would do, like suddenly cut to a full music video parody of a song that has nothing to do with the movie. I guess the only thing it has to do with is that it's about a man talking to his son. And that's it. It ticks the like somebody rapping who shouldn't be rapping, which in the late 90s, early 2000s was a wildly popular comedy trope, and it has never been funny. The idea of Dr. Evil rapping, I'm sorry, it's not inherently funny that a weird white man with a strong Canadian accent is rapping. It's not. It's the opposite of funny. And then it goes on for like they do the whole fucking song almost. It is so like I said, I wish you could have seen my face.
He has like a Tupac-esque bandana on or something fucking stupid.
He's in his Dr. No Nehru jacket, gray jumpsuit with a Tupac style bandana. It just like my skin is crawling even as we talk. It is so hard to watch. It is so hard to watch.
He's doing the Will Smith, just the two of us, but nothing will ever be as funny as the actual lyrics to that song. Have you ever listened to it?
It's been a long time since I've listened to it, to be honest.
Well, give Willie Style a listen. So my... Because I heard this fairly recently. I'd never really paid attention to the verses on this song, but I heard it fairly recently. And I was listening to the lyrics and I was like, what? So there's one verse. So just to debrief on that, he starts out talking about, this is Will Smith. So imagine Will Smith not being able to figure out how to put a fucking DVD into a computer for his son to watch. And then
probably because he's trying to put it on a CD-ROM drive, which is not.
Yeah, that's that. And then he jumped directly into, hey, I'm going to die someday. That's an actual verse.
Yeah, that is way funnier than the parody version by Dr. Evil. All right. So Austin and Felicity get taken to Dr. Evil's base, which is now in a volcano. I forgot to mention that. A volcano shaped like Dr. Evil doing the pinky thing because they have twice the budget this time. They do. It's like the exact same thing. They're in the silver jumpsuits, except Heather Graham is in like a bikini version of the jumpsuit. Fat Bastard is there. So now we for the first time in the movie, we have 3 mics on screen. They launch the Alan Parsons project, the rocket to the moon that's going to blow up the White House. Of course, it's shaped like a dick. There's a bunch of people who see it. They keep saying, they do this twice, by the way. They're put in a slow-moving death trap. In the first movie, it was sharks with laser beams, or it was a sea bass with laser beams attached to their head. In this one, it's just a regular pit of fire. They easily escape. Then they follow Dr. Evil to the moon base. It is kind of funny. The way that they do this is by hitching a ride on Apollo 11, the actual moon mission. It doesn't make a lick of sense because it would have taken them, weeks to
right. I'm thinking about that
too. but I'm fine with that. Like I'm not going to be that much of a stick in the mud. At least the moon mission happened in 1969. So like at this point, I'm just glad that they are in the correct year. They land on the moon. Austin fights Mini-Me. This part is kind of funny, but it goes on way too long. It just feels like it should end like 3 times before it actually ends. I think the reason why I thought it was kind of funny is because Mini-Me is obviously a dummy and he's like flailing it around. And I just like fight scenes with obvious dummies. But then it devolves, of course, into Austin sitting on like a toilet-like receptacle and then making exaggerated pooping noises, like straining noises.
It's the same joke from the first movie where they're in the bathroom in Las Vegas.
But without Tom Arnold there to...
and he shits a baby out or whatever. Like, they're so
we don't need to say anything else about that. He confronts Dr. Evil again. Felicity is killed in the scuffle because, Dr. Evil does the classic Bond/Batman villain thing where he's like, you can either stop me or save the girl. And initially Austin stops him, and then he realizes, oh, I have a time machine, so I can go back in time. And this is where we really get like multiple mics in play because the Fat Bastard thing, like, okay, I expected that. I forgot that there were 2 Austin Powers, so we got a lot of scenes here with like 2 Austins and then Dr. Evil because now it's a time paradox. There's 2 of them, and he stopped Dr. Evil. Is there anything else to say, really? I mean, it's like,
no.
Again, this is kind of the movie is just, the machine is just running, The
only thing there is to fucking say is that at the end, this whole motherfucking movie is about how Austin needs to get his mojo back because Dr. Evil stole it, and then what ends up happening is Dr. Evil like smashed it on the ground, and then what's her name is like, oh, you had it this whole time. Okay. So we didn't have to do none of this then.
I mean, yeah, to be fair, it's like joke's on us because that is the plot of every movie where somebody thinks they lose something and then it turns out that the power was in them all along. Like that is like the cliche. But it's also
usually there's something redeeming along the way.
Yeah, usually they like learn something.
Yeah, no, there was nothing. It's just like, oh, I could have been fucking Felicity this whole time.
Right.
Okay.
And then
why didn't she tell him that earlier then, too?
that is the real question. Yeah.
You know what pissed me off too? This is way earlier in the film, but it really made, because in the first one, him and Vanessa get in a fight and he is driving in, right? Or like somebody's sad and driving. Yeah, he's driving in Las Vegas, right?
Las Vegas, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in this one, after he can't have sex with her, he gets in his car and is driving around, I guess, England in the 60s, looking sad. And I'm like, bro, it's just because he can't have sex with her, right? Like, it's so fucking dumb.
It just feels unearned. It's like the pathos of it worked in the first movie. And, you know, I remember saying that it's like, even though it's dumb and, you know, I don't like take the story of Austin Powers seriously, I was invested in the characters. And there was kind of like a sadness in that scene that was, I don't want to say that it like made me cry or anything, but it was affecting in the sense that, like, you know, he's looking back on everything that happened since 1967. And, you know, he's really aware of like how alone he is and how like out of place he is. And it's just this movie like went through the motions of that without any of the effectiveness. They just did it because they did it in the first movie. I said at the beginning that I was pleasantly surprised by how watchable this was. But I can't stress enough that I mean that in the barest minimum terms. Like, I was literally able to get through this movie without wanting to puke.
Well, wait until we have to watch Goldmember.
I know, because I have no fuzzy memories about Goldmember. I hated that shit from day one, and I know it's only going to be worse. So in a weird way, honestly, next month's movie might actually be a step up, even though it is the first of, again, 4 Shreks.
Well, Shrek is a pretty good movie.
Shrek is solid. Yeah. We will have to deal with the Scottish voice again. But at least, to my knowledge, it's been a while since I've seen Shrek. I do think you see his ass, but I don't think he ever rubs his own nipples. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure he does.
It's not Mike Myers' ass that we're seeing. We're seeing a CGI ogre's ass. So that's at least, if nothing else, a break from...
Yeah. It might be a lateral move, but it is at least like it's a different ass. So... So hopefully we'll have a better time with Shrek, and after that, I don't know, man. This is going to be. I hope that the rest of the world improves in the next 6 months, because if this is the brightest part of my life in the next 6 months, there's going to be some dark times. What can I say? It's all downhill from here, and it's a dark day when watching Shrek feels like it might be a step up. So, and that's all. That's all I have.
Let's hop on the good foot and do the bad thing.